Hi, and welcome. In this session, we're going to discuss which cloud service is right for your Java apps. My name is Teresa Nguyen. I'm a program manager in Azure Compute Team, working on Java and Azure. I'm joined here with James.
Hello, everyone. James Faulkner here. I Director of Product Marketing for Red Hat Times, part of our Red Hat Application Developer Suite. Today, we're going to be talking about, as Teresa mentioned, the best as-a-service platform for your Java apps. So we'll start with a quick summary of open source software in support of Java apps, including operating systems, application servers, and frameworks. Then we'll cover the as-a-service types generally associated with bringing Java to the cloud. And finally, then we'll focus on the considerations you need to think about as you form your plans for moving out of the data center, off premises, and onto the cloud. We'll also have some resources for you to explore later on in this session to learn more about how Red Hat and Microsoft are partnering to offer a range of solutions. So I'll hand it off to Teresa to start us off and talk about open source.
Thanks, James. All right. So everybody who's in open source probably know Richard Stallman. Open source is about free software, but really when it comes down to it, free is not really free. Free to consume, yes, but free to create and maintain, not really, because it does take out developers' time to create this and also to maintain it for the ecosystem to be able to use this, to use software. So on top of that, you have to look at, what does it mean to running your open source application on premise and going to the cloud? You still have to consider who's going to be responsible for what part of the components, the software, the distribution, the user, or the cloud provider, or maybe your software vendor. And just like anything else, when it comes to software running your product, your mission critical product, you have to consider, will it be supported, yes or no? And if you have the expertise in-house. Some bigger shops probably have the expertise and can maintain unsupported open source software, but to be assured that your mission critical applications are up and running, you might want to consider commercially supported open source products such as products provided by Red Hat. And also when you're moving to the cloud, compliance and regulation becomes a bigger issue because now the data and all the hardware and facilities maintained by somebody else. So those are things that you want to consider as you move to the cloud. Open source doesn't necessarily mean it's free. It's taxing on somebody somehow, somewhere, and you need to be a responsible citizen, use it, consume it, and contribute back, or get a commercial software product where the company can actually provide the feedback back to the open source project and help that ecosystem grow. So let's discuss now the context of Java. What does that look like?
Yeah, so thanks, Teresa. So Java, and in particular Java EE, they were built for the enterprise, and it's really one of the main reasons why, after 2 decades, there's still, depending on who you ask, 7 to 10 million Java developers out there, and 38 billion, we estimate, active JVMs in use today. So typical brochureware websites, they don't really need transactions, but you better believe banks or airlines or governments, they really need transactions along with many of the other enterprise-grade capabilities that you see listed on the left here. That's really what Java was designed for early on in its life. And since Java was introduced back in 1995, standards like Java EE and products like JBoss or Spring Framework or Glassfish and many, many others, they've been developed that address these listed use cases that you see in the middle column on this slide, and of course, many, many more. And it's really been great for Java as a whole to build the ecosystem and the usage around the world. Java itself was open sourced in 2007 by Sun Microsystems, and in the last couple of years, we've seen how open source frameworks like Micronaut, new open source frameworks like Micronaut and Quarkus, that are designed to even more efficiently build and deploy containerized Java apps to constrained environments like Kubernetes and function as a service platforms that we'll be talking about later. So Java in particular, open source Java has really been and continues to be a fantastic choice for modernizing existing apps and developing net new. However, there is another factor to consider, which is the operating system. Teresa?
Great. So in terms of operating system, Microsoft loves Linux. As you can see here, we have over 50% of our VMs are running on Linux. There's a bunch of distributed distros that we support, CentOS, Debian, Flatcar, you name it, it's there. We also have a special flavor where we have integrated support with some of these Linux distros, particularly with Red Hat Linux. So what this means is if you're running your Linux on Azure, that your OS would be supported by Red Hat and Microsoft. And then there's also other flavors of SAP. So again, Linux is a first-class citizen on Azure, and we have also special tuned kernels that would provide 25% faster network throughput. And then, we have most of our big customers are also running Linux. So this is something that it's like bread and butter to us. So running Linux on Azure is easy as running Windows on Azure.
Hey, Teresa, I see RHEL listed on this slide. So is there anything special about like RHEL on Azure specifically?
Yeah, so we have this flavor of RHEL called RHEL. So it's a Red Hat updated infrastructure. But so what that means is customers can run their Linux VMs on Azure and don't have to worry about security updates or patches or anything like that. We will take care of the OS layer for you. So you can just have to worry about your application. So unlike other VMs where you have to maintain your own OSs, this is an additional option that you have with Azure VMs.
Nice.
So great. So now let's dive into which cloud is right for your Java apps. James, and then we can also take a look at some pros and cons. So for infrastructure as a service, or most it as IaaS, it's the closest you can get parity to on-premise kind of deployment. And the great things about this is you can have it's flexible. You can do anything you want to it. Nothing will change unless you change it. You can scale, but you have to do also the networking. And in terms of cost, is the lowest option you can get in the cloud. As with anything else, there's some trade-offs. So the cons in this is the OS management. Anything that goes wrong, updates and fixes, patches, you need to take care of it yourself. As I mentioned earlier, the RHEL version, Microsoft would take care of that. So you can also run that flavor of RHEL you like. Also on the app server management, logging, networking, all that has to be configured by you. Infrastructure service, we provide the infrastructure, but you really have to update everything and keep it up and maintained by yourself. So let's take a look into the Java apps running on VM, VMSS. So VMs is the Azure Virtual Machine, VMSS, the Virtual Machine Scale Set. So recently we announced the availability of JBoss EAP on RHEL running on VM and VMSS. You can start playing around with it on the Azure Quick Start on the website, or you can purchase it directly from the Azure Marketplace. So this comes in two different flavors, pay-as-you-go or BYOS, also known as bring on subscription. So if you're running your Java workload on-premise and now you need to migrate to the cloud, you can bring that license to the cloud and don't have to worry about going in there and getting different types of licensing. We also did a public preview of Azure Hybrid Cloud or Hybrid Benefits. This will now allow you to, if you're running a pay-as-you-go SKU, you can switch it back to the BYOS type of licensing. The great part about this thing is you can do pay-as-you-go for testing and development, and once you go in production, you switch it over to BYOS. Then you have that subscription that you have in advance, and that's a big cost savings. Other things like built-in AAD, RBAC, networking, all that is built into the VM in the console. So everything that I mentioned for the VM, the VMS is much better in the sense that it can scale horizontally up to 1,000 VMs. It also supports different networking, the layer 4, that load balancer, and also app gateway. It has high availability and resiliency. So if you have a big deployment that you just need to scale horizontally, this is the best option for you. Again, you can go to the Quick Start and play around with it and take a look. It is available in standalone mode and clustered VMs and clustered VMSS. So now let's take a look at some of the pros and cons for the next one.
Yeah, so this is Kubernetes as a service. So this is sort of the next level of management above the traditional IaaS or infrastructure as a service. So Kubernetes as a service offerings give you exactly what you think, Kubernetes capabilities out of the box. So you can kind of think of it as the app server for cloud native apps and microservices. Several vendors, including Red Hat for Kubernetes distributions, that each offer additional value and capability on top of the core platform. Given that Kubernetes is an abstraction of container orchestration, it can really be deployed across your entire cloud footprint, including on-premise, VMs, or public and private cloud, or even bare metal. On the flip side, as far as the cons go, there is a learning curve to Kubernetes concepts and deploying and managing clusters. So in addition, its inherent flexibility can also contribute to that learning curve, especially when you're configuring it for enterprise features like auto scaling of nodes or highly available clusters or identity management. Kubernetes is really designed for cloud scale workloads, so many of the capabilities will go unused for simpler use cases. So for running your Java apps on Kubernetes and Azure, Microsoft and Red Hat have jointly brought OpenShift to market. So with this offering, you get Kubernetes out of the box, with Microsoft and Red Hat managing the infrastructure based on Red Hat's distribution of Kubernetes called OpenShift, while you, the application designer and deployer, build and deploy your Java apps using Red Hat JBoss EAP or other Red Hat Java software, all based on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Additional value on Kubernetes that we bring includes cluster node scaling, integration with a wide range of application and Azure services, things like Azure Active Directory and others. So with Kubernetes as a service, you get Kubernetes, but you're still managing your Java applications in your build environment. So I'll hand it over back to Teresa to talk about the solution for that particular issue. Teresa?
All right. So the next option that you want to consider is platforms as a service, also known as PaaS. So this is really based on a service where the cloud provider manages the infrastructure. It's a fully managed service. You as the user only have to worry about the applications. This is kind of on the flip side of an infrastructure as a service, in the sense that all the pros listed here, like OS management, framework, features, networking, everything you can think of, scale HA, that's all managed by the cloud provider. And then on the flip side on that is the cons. So you don't have the flexibility you would have on a VM. You can't access the host, and the scaling is limited to 100 instances. But and then it also doesn't support stateful services. So there's some trade-off. That's why you would have to consider if the IaaS or PaaS is better. But comparing the list of pros and cons, that will give you some idea of what kind of application you want to manage. All right. And next, we can go to looking at recent deployments. Was it in Ignite last month? We announced a public preview of JBoss EAP on App Service, and we're using JBoss EAP and RHELs because these are two very popular open source projects that people are running in production. App Service is Azure's managed PaaS service. So with this combination of services, you can run your production workload on-premise, migrate to the cloud, and still get the same type of productivity, but minus the infrastructure management part. It is DevOps friendly because it is an Azure first-party service. We have built-in CI/CD, and we also have security and monitoring that's built into the platform itself. And as before, James mentioned, we partnered up with Red Hat to provide unified integrated support. So what that means is, if you have problems with infrastructure or the application server, you can contact Microsoft or Red Hat, and we will address it for you. So this, in addition to Java EE, we also support Java SE and Tomcat deployments. So if you're a Java shop and you have a war jar ER file, just drop it in, get it going. This is the easiest way to get to the cloud. So let's give the audience a recap of what we just covered in terms of cloud services, James.
Sure. So this is our chart showing kind of the difference between the three different offerings. They all have different use cases. Depending on your requirements, you'll want to choose one or the other. For example, if you're just looking to save costs and you're willing to do a lot of the management yourself, you may consider the lowest cost option with Azure VM or VMSS. If you need additional capabilities or you don't want to manage the entire stack yourself, you can consider Azure Red Hat OpenShift or Azure App Service with JBoss EAP on there that Teresa just talked about. So really, there's a lot of different choices here, both in terms of Java, the underlying infrastructure, as well as the level of management. So, but let's finally turn in the last part to talk about where the actual innovation lies with companies, which is the application workloads, and look at some considerations when considering a move from on-prem to cloud. So a lot of factors here. Migrations are sometimes easy, but most of the time they're painful and require quite a bit of upfront planning. Single applications are likely to be pretty straightforward, but considering your app landscape and the destination is super important when talking about and planning for migration, even for lift and shift use cases. In particular, how much control you want or need in your target platform. Do you want to tweak each and every setting? Do you have a budget for a fully managed solution? Do you have time constraints like an upcoming on-premise license renewal or even real estate renewals? Is your infrastructure struggling to keep up with everyone working from home due to COVID-19? Now, these and other considerations really factor importantly into how you plan and what kinds of tooling you'll need in order to do this effectively. In many cases, it makes sense to do a lift and shift first, for example, of phased migration, then start to look at refactoring to be more cloud native, get more experience and more time on the cloud. And again, target platform comes into play here. So, for example, how will your refactored apps talk to your legacy backend systems that you cannot touch? Are you looking to implement newer standards like microprofile? Do your Spring Boot apps fit in your cloud footprint at scale? So as you consider the apps, also consider how much you want to spend on managing the infrastructure and how much control you need again. Do you have a lot of proprietary applications that may need to be migrated to an open source solution like JBoss EAP? Is the managed service managed by the experts who understand the underlying tech? So there's lots and lots and lots of questions and factors for consideration to consider. And tooling, though, can help here. Tooling can, in many cases, get you a lot farther along than you would otherwise have be able to do on your own. So here are some of the considerations for tooling. Like I said before, a single app migration is generally pretty straightforward. But what happens when you have 1,000 different applications, which we do have in the world today? What happens when you have multiple different languages, multiple different frameworks that you're using, multiple different operating systems? What's your cloud and container strategy if you're moving off from on-prem VMs into containers, for example? Do you have tooling that can kind of help that transition in addition to the applications themselves? If you're doing a lift and shift, that may be a little bit easier. If you're considering a replatform or refactor to take advantage of some of the capabilities of things like microservices and serverless, do you have tooling that can help you do that migration? Do you have budget constraints, again, time constraints, upcoming compelling events that may require you to hurry along? More importantly, if you have a wide number of applications, do you know which ones are easy and which ones are hard? Because that's really going to help you do that planning. And when you have tooling that can help you in this area, it makes the planning a lot easier. Another consideration technically is the ease of use of a tool. Does it have the right interfaces for the way you intend to use it? Is there a command line interface? Is there a GUI? Is there a web-based interface? Does it integrate with your CI/CD integration tooling so that you can do regular analysis of your applications as you're migrating them? This is probably the most important one, extensibility. Every customer has different types of applications and different ways they develop software, and many times the way that you design software introduces a particular way of designing software that may not be compatible with the target platform, which means you probably want to develop custom ways of looking at your software and identifying those commonalities in your specific company. And that's where extensibility comes in. Can you extend the tool to be able to address the specific customer issues at your particular site? And then lastly, organizational readiness. Are you ready to jump to the cloud? Not only the technology, but the process and the culture and the people. And the organizational readiness is super important in considering that when you're moving to cloud. So those are some of the concerns to take to consider when you're moving and planning a migration. Now let's talk about some specific offerings that we have in this space, and I'll hand it back over.
All right, great. So we have a lot of tools on Microsoft, but one of the tools I want to highlight here is the Azure Migration Assistance. It's available now. You can migrate Tomcat applications to App Service. And we will be releasing this migration tool to extend it to other Java apps. This is a demo video. We're not going to play it for the interest of time. And this is the second migration tool I want to talk about, is migrating your Linux workload to Azure, specifically running on JBoss EAP server. This tool simplifies the proof of concept stage, evaluation, and migration process. So what it does is it actually takes your workload, assess it, looks at the infrastructure configuration, it'll deploy it and test it, and then also do post-deployment configuration. This tool uses the Ansible playbook for the JBoss server deployment. It also works with the Red Hat migration tool. Again, this is a tool for migrating from on-premise to Azure. James, do you want to talk about the third and migration tool around Red Hat?
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. So Teresa mentioned the Red Hat Migration Toolkit for applications. This is a tool that sort of operates at that highest level and really looks at the logic in your applications and does a number of analysis and provides a number of reports to help you plan and actually execute on your migration strategy. So it is a free and open source tool. The upstream project is called WindUp. And again, it's designed to automate the migration of many apps, not one app, but thousands of applications. It does this through effort estimation, essentially painting you a picture of how hard is your migration going to be, which apps can be migrated very quickly, and which apps are going to require more in-depth analysis and work, so that you can assign not only time estimates, but also assign team members that may have additional expertise in a particular area to do a particular part of that migration. So it's really about accelerating code migration and giving you an estimate of how long it's going to take and how hard it's going to be. It's a number of different APIs here. So there's both a command line interface, a web interface, as well as plugins for common IDEs like Eclipse or CodeReady, VS Code. And so it's very addressable. It's very approachable. It can be used both, sort of one time, kick the tires. It can also be automated through the CLI, so that you can do things like automated CI/CD integration. And it's integrated, as Teresa mentioned, with the Azure Workload Builder. So it kind of provides a one-stop shop for your entire migration planning and execution. So
All
Teresa,
right.
you want to cover the summary of the different offerings?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of like an overview of you're taking a look at what or how you can deploy to Azure or to the cloud. There's your cloud strategy should be carefully considered based on what James mentioned earlier, between the tooling and your strategy and budget and resourcing. And then you understand the requirements and limitations. And then if you're running on different types of application servers that maybe a commercial type and you're adopting an open source stack, you might want to consider migrating the Jakarta EE or Java EE apps to an open source project like JBoss EAP. That's a first step. A second step is migrating now to on-premise if you're not already, from on-premise to Azure if you're not already in the cloud. From there onto Azure, the easiest way to look at this is if you're running a Kubernetes as a service type of containers and deployment, then you might want to consider Arrow because it is jointly created and delivered by Red Hat and Microsoft, and also includes integrated support. If you're running dev tests and you want to do the quickest, fastest route to the cloud, then Azure VMs and VMSS is the way to go. With dev tests, you can run Wildfly, which is an open source version of JBoss. It's an upstream project, but it doesn't include support. And also you can run on CentOS. Again, this is great for dev tests, but if you want to run your production grade type of deployment, then you might want to look at the VMs and VMSS, especially for bigger, larger deployment. When you migrate to thousands of servers, virtual machine scale set's a good way to go there. So right now we have it available in the Quick Start and Marketplace, and it does come in different type of configuration. BYOS is only available for JBoss. For RHEL, it's pay-as-you-go, but BYOS is coming along in the near future. And the last part is the platforms as service. So if you want to go to the cloud and you have some applications that's ready containerized, or you have some files you just want to drop into a managed infrastructure, Azure App Service on Linux is the best way to go. It currently supports Tomcat, or supports Tomcat since 2014, and Java SE. And now it supports JBoss EAP on RHEL as a standalone mode. If you need clustering, that too is coming soon. So all the boxes in the yellow circle, those are on the roadmap. So hopefully this will give you an overview and understanding of where you can land your Java workload in Azure based on your type of applications and needs.
All right, thank you, Teresa. So lots of information we went over today. I want to leave you with some additional resources that you can check out on your own. So we have a number of resources for both Azure capabilities as well as Red Hat OpenShift capabilities and Red Hat JBoss EAP capabilities. You can see the links there. We have a number of quick starts, links to the marketplace, as well as to some of the migration tooling that we talked about, the migration assistant, as well as the Red Hat migration toolkit for applications. So lots of stuff to check out. You can also scan the code in the upper right to if you need to get in touch with Microsoft and Red Hat in a potential migration that you want to find out more information about how we can help. Scan that QR code, fill out the survey, and fill out your information, and we'll definitely be getting in touch with you. So I want to thank you for attending today, and both Teresa and I enjoyed talking with you today, and hope you learned a little bit more about the considerations for migrating into as a service for your Java apps, and how Red Hat and Microsoft can help you in your needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.